Hey everybody, welcome. I'm BJ, this is Brickhouse Builds, and another big welcome to all the new subscribers I picked up from that Buell video. You guys are awesome, a lot of support there. And to you guys, this is going to be a video on wiring the GL650 I'm working on here, another project that I have. This is going to be part one of a multi-part series for building this wiring harness, and this is kind of repurposing the original and mixing in some new components to work with the layout that I have on this thing. And parts 2 and 3 are going to be more detailed, so this video is going to be more kind of stripping the original harness down, coming up with a plan, and explaining kind of what I'm going to be doing with this. But anyway, let's get to the video. Enjoy. Alright guys, we're finally to the point where we're doing the wiring for the bike. Now, what I want to do for this bike is not necessarily a full custom harness build, but rather repurposing the original harness and slimming it down to make it work with our needs, because we have a lot of stuff that is relocated or changed slightly. So we need to have kind of a custom layout, but not necessarily like full-blown custom wiring, since a lot of the components, like our stock type design. Now this isn't going to be like a full-blown how-to, because it's just simply impossible to account for all of the variations and changes on everybody's bike. So this is just going to be kind of like documenting some of the things, some of the tactics and thinking processes behind what I'm doing and the decisions I'll make as far as like where to maybe things to cut or modify. And hopefully the information will be awesome for you guys and you can utilize that on your own projects. Alright, now the first step is I have the harness completely laid out on the table here, and I have a lot of the factory stuff plugged into it. Just that makes it easier for you guys to see kind of where everything goes, because whenever it's just a bare harness, you got a bunch of plugs and it can look a little bit overwhelming, and that's okay. So we have our stock fuse box. This goes up on the triple clamp here, and that's going to feed in and eventually make its way over to the ignition switch, which would normally plug in right here up in the front of the bike. We've since moved that. And then up here we also have our gauges. So we have our plug for the gauge power and backlight, turn signals, that kind of thing. And then next to that, these two plugs, the red and the black, they usually look very similar, 9-pin connectors on these Hondas. That's our left and right bar controls. So the controls that are on the bike now, they would normally just plug into this. You move your way down the harness. These two plugs right here, these are going to be our coil leads. Right here we have our fan control. Moving down a little bit further, this blue with red, that's going to be our oil pressure, and then we have a green with blue, I believe that's neutral. And then going down further, of course, we have our starter solenoid. Now we have a different solenoid on the bike, but the plug is the same, so we just have to remember how everything's pinned, confirm that. And we should be very simple there. Down a little bit further, the regulator rectifier. Now we have a RIX unit, which is actually disabling or getting rid of the black signal wire in this. So we're going to have to make a little bit of a modification there, which is fine. Here's our turn signal flasher relay. And then moving to the tail. This is where your igniters would go, or your spark units for these bikes. And then your chassis ground, and then you have basically your tail light leads, so brake light, tail light, turn signals. And that's about it. I mean, there can be more to some harnesses, but these are pretty straightforward. Now, the kind of first step I want to do is get rid of all of the wrap and coating on it, because I'm going to be replacing that. But getting rid of it will allow me to kind of strip out some of the sections I don't want and remove things I don't want. Now, as far as modifications to the harness in general, with how it functions, basically the only thing I want to do on this one is just disable the park feature. So that's just going to be a little bit of a series of wires that I'm not going to need, that I'll remove from the harness just for simplicity and ease of use. So anyway, the first thing I'm going to do, go ahead and start getting rid of the loom. Alright guys, you can see here I'm working with the ignition switch that I retrofitted on the bike in another video, and as of now you can see me, I'm just pulling off some wires just using my soldering iron, and that's for the park feature for that stock switch, which I don't intend to use. And then basically what I'm doing here, I have some new TXL, some high quality wire in some 14 gauge, and I'm replacing the power in and power out on that switch because they were a little bit undersized because it's kind of a cheaper switch. But this is how I remedied that situation. So I have a 14 gauge going in, and then on the output side I have two 14 gauge going out, and those those end up splitting and running one to the fuse box and then one say to the fan and the ignition side of things. So try to make sure everything is properly sized so it's just going to work and last for a long time. So at this point here I'm just depinning a few more things. Like I said, there's going to be a few components that I want to keep and repurpose, and there's also going to be a few circuits that I just want to disable or get rid of completely. Being a GL650, it had a lot of accessory wiring on it because the bike had fairings, so they expect people to wire in like CB radios and all kinds of different accessories. So I'm just removing a lot of that here. Alright, so we're slowly starting to make progress here. And what I've been doing is just comparing everything in the diagram to what I have in the harness, and then coming up with a plan on any changes I need to make. And so now I'm going to go ahead and just start getting wires on the bike, which is going to start making you feel better. So basically what I'm starting with is power distribution. So this goes into the solenoid here, and this is going to supply like our our large single red wire here. This is just going to be power to the key. And then we have a single wire which splits into two. This is going to be for our regulator rectifier. And then the other two wires, well not other two other wires here, this is going to be obviously to activate the solenoid to start the bike. So this is going to be from the controls and some of the neutral and safety switches and stuff. And then the only other thing I did is I added a tiny little red wire here, and this is just going to be for the TrailTech Vapor. Since this is the only real change we're making to the bike, this needs its own kind of standalone power system that's constant hot. So, I have to add it down here, or you could add it at the battery if you wanted, but this was just simple enough since I'm redoing this. Now, basically, I'm not making many real drastic changes to the operation of the harness or how the circuitry works. I'm still going to put in the well, wherever it is, the diode and stuff for the neutral safety, and make sure everything is the same there. I'm basically just shortening things, rearranging it, and then one other change I'm making is the taillight power, which would normally come from the fuse, and it goes back into the ignition or back into the key and then back out. And I think that's all just so they have like a different wire color change ability there. And basically I'm just going to bypass the key because I'm keeping this key very simple with one single power lead in and then just one position. There's no park or anything like that. So one single power in and then just splitting the two power wires out, and then those are going to get distributed among the circuits as factory. So yeah, I'm gonna start putting stuff on the bike. I'm gonna quickly go ahead and loom this while I have a chance with some Nymex, and we'll start getting stuff going. It'll start looking better. Alright guys, so here's the situation I'm running into that you can look out for. Now I want to extend this harness that runs the ignition. Now these are left-right specific. You can see two leads. I mean, they're all the same wire color, but two leads have a white tab on them. Okay, so if I want to extend this, I need to make sure that I remember which lead is which. Otherwise you're going to have some real ignition problems, and the bike just probably will not run, or it'll be 180 out, or who knows, it'll just be really weird acting. So I need to extend these wires, and I don't have like I don't want to use a blue with white stripe wire, and I don't want to use a yellow with white stripe because there could potentially be that color wire on the bike already. So I just need to remember which wire is which. Now I don't have white heat shrink, but I have black. So you just have to make a conscious effort to remember these things. So I'm going to extend these wires, and just before the connector, you see where these things have the little white piece of heat shrink, I'm just going to have a piece of black, and that'll be the way I differentiate them. And then I don't have to go and buy like you know, an oddball color wire or something like that. So just need to make a mental note. But the reason I'm extending this in the first place is I'm running it to the other side of the bike and up the harness, up where I'm running the harness. That's also from like my starter solenoid and stuff like that. I just want to run it up here so it's all in one area, and it won't quite reach, so that plug would end up being about right here, and aesthetically I can't let that happen. So I want all my plugs to be in a kind of a common area up here. So I'm trying to build in space and have the bulk of the harness connections all through here. So that's why I want to extend that. That's what I'm going to do. Alright, so another little tip here in regards to this particular harness. Now, we're going to extend all 4 wires, right? Well, I'm going to do a solder joint on them, and you got to think, if you have all 4 solder joints in the same spot, you got your heat shrink on there, it's going to make kind of like a larger, like a bulgy area, and if I'm going to cover this with loom, that might make it difficult to slide over. So one thing you want to try to do is, instead of just cutting them all in the same spot, stagger them. So you got 4 different cut points, so like one here, one about there, and so on and so forth. And that's going to make, whenever you bundle this thing together, it's going to make it as compact as possible, and it's going to have one continuous, you know, visual diameter. So that's what you want to try to do. Anyway, I'm going to get to it. So we'll just start with this one. And there you have it, one extended harness section. So now I can go ahead and route this thing where it needs to go up there, and then once we're further along on the harness itself, we will go ahead and terminate these. But for right now, I have them marked with some black marker. So I can go ahead, actually I will go ahead and put some heat shrink on this side, and at least put the tiny little pieces there and just kind of finalize the back half of this. Alright, so we got a little bit more done, and I want to kind of showcase what I've done down here. Now, I pulled the shock out, pulled the coolant bottle out just to kind of make my life a little bit easier for working around this. This is the AC, the alternator output here. I went ahead and re-loomed it, and then I separated the neutral wire. I went ahead and loomed that individually too, just to make it more clean. And then your ignition output, you saw me, I went ahead and I extended this harness, okay? And I have all of these things going over here, and they're going to run up the bike where I made these pre-existing tabs for like zip ties to keep it all clean. Now, one thing that's hard to show originally was my grounds. Now, what I'm doing, I'm kind of doing a starter mod on this one as well. So this is my main harness ground. It's going to be one of 2. Now, this is obviously bolted to the starter bracket, the starter motor bracket, and on the other side of this bolt is the main ground lug that goes to the battery. So that's a direct ground point there, back into the harness. I'm going to run this all the way up to the front of the bike, and that's going to bolt on the chassis as well. So it's going to have multiple ground points through the bike, which I always like to do. So that's kind of the method I'm using on that one. The only other piece of harness that you haven't seen is this right here, this little section, and that is actually for the rear brake switch, which I have mounted on the swing arm instead of being like over in this area. So I'm going to go ahead and kind kind of call it good back here. The only other thing I'm waiting on is an extension harness for like an SAE cable for like a battery tender. And I'm going to use that for a combination of like the phone charger plug and then also the battery tender for in the off season. So going to wait on that and we'll go back together. But as for now, I'm going to go ahead and move up top. Alright everybody, that's going to do it for part 1 of the wiring video for the GL650. Parts 2 and 3 I'm going to roll out as soon as possible, so stay tuned, keep an eye out on the channel for those videos to come. And before too long, we're going to do the first start, and this thing is going to be very, very, very close to completion. So you don't want to miss out, so subscribe if you haven't already. Check me out on social media, and you can see all of this stuff before it happens on YouTube. And yeah, hope to see you guys there. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.